Boss by Bossman, right?
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Dr. Regina Bradley, and this is OutKasted Conversations, Season 2, Episode 7, because I'm country. So, my guest is one of my homegirls, my partner in crime, the one, the only, the OG, Christina Lee, Southern hip-hop journalist extraordinaire. Miss Lee, how you?
Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to be here too, girl.
I'm
We act
honored.
up when we get together. So you got to answer the question to get into the club. How did you become outcasted?
I became outcasted fairly late in life.
What?
I grew up in suburban Maryland, where basically the only music I really had access to growing up was like Savage Garden and like Goo Goo Dolls.
Not even go-go?
Not even go-go. That wasn't until later. That wasn't until college, because I wasn't that close to DC, right?
Ah, got it. Okay.
So when we finally got cable in the house, which was during high school, aka the best, worst decision my mom could have made, because I didn't do any studying whatsoever. I finally got exposed to MTV and BET, and I saw OutKast among all the other mainstream rap stars at the time. We're talking Jay-Z, Fabulous, and so on and so forth. So I knew that they were a big deal by the time I moved to Atlanta in 2010, but I didn't understand what they fully meant until I moved to Atlanta. And as if, like a sign, I remember like once I moved here and I kind of got my situation together, AKA I got 2 waitressing jobs because I needed to make some money. I pulled up to Kavarna in Oakhurst, and there was a house like a couple streets down that had just done a yard sale because they had like a box of goods that were like, okay, we couldn't even sell this for any money, so whoever wants this, they get it for free. And in there was a CD of Aquemini and a Greatest Hits. And I was like, you're kidding. Who would give this stuff away for, like, obviously, like, I felt like the mom just, like, rummaged through, like, someone's personal collection and, like, didn't get permission or anything. But I put those in the car because I didn't have like aux cord or anything. So I was like, okay, let me listen to this. And they sort of became my unofficial guide to the city. They were the best tour guides that I could possibly get because, suddenly all these roads and these landmarks, like they were tangible to me. And with that, like their stories became tangible as well.
Okay, so did you come up in the era, so you said BET and MTV. So did you come up in the era of 106 and Park?
Correct.
My whole life revolved around 106 and Park. Like I would get home from school,
right.
I would watch my Dragon Ball Z because that was important. No, for real. I got home, I would watch my Dragon Ball Z, and then 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm unavailable because 106 and Park is on with AJ and Free.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. So I was less about 106 and Park, although I do remember when like Jin was kind of like coming up. That was a big deal. And killing it on the Freestyle Fridays for sure. But I was definitely more of a rap city, which ended up being like totally serendipitous because Big Tigger was one of the first people who I saw in a nightclub once I moved here. And I was that weird person that was like, hi. I didn't understand he had like moved on to radio. I was just like, I saw you in Rap City and like grew up watching you. And that must have been so weird because it's just
He's probably like, oh,
weird.
Appreciate it.
I guess. How old are you again? So I was more about the Rap City countdowns for sure.
So you were more gangster than I was?
No,
that sounds like you were more gangster than I was.
That's
because
incorrect.
It's okay. It's okay. Because Rap City was on when Dragon Ball Z was on. Because Rap City used to come on like 4 o'clock. It's a conflict of interest.
I see. It's fine.
You don't know my life. You might know my life.
We compliment each other. That doesn't mean everything has to be similar.
That's why you my girl. Okay. So, I mean, like, no, but seriously though, like you are the Southern hip hop journalist. I mean, like, besides like our good friend, like Rodney Carmichael, Gavin Godfrey, we have like the squad, but Killer Mike said you were a genius. So
oh my God.
He did. So, I mean, like, can you talk to me a little bit about how you got into like focusing on Southern hip hop? Is it because you moved to Atlanta? Or was this like a,
I didn't understand what Southern hip hop was becoming until I started freelance writing. Freelance writing, again, was something I had to do out of necessity because...
So for the uninitiated, what does freelance mean?
Oh my God, it basically means I'm a contract employee. I wasn't like on staff for anybody. It was just like I needed to figure out something to do with my journalism degree and there were no jobs available. So I ended up in Atlanta by way of an internship at Pace Magazine, which didn't focus on hip hop, mind you. But like once I settled in, this was right around the time that Gucci Mane was starting to become like a star. he's talking about Waka Flocka Flame outside of Fulton County Jail as he's reading a press release about how he's going to do better this time. That wouldn't happen until years later.
You can't even tell who Gucci is now. Gucci's like, I done cleaned up my face. My skin is popping.
He's like, skinny dipping in lagoons and stuff. He's just living that good life.
He's living his best life.
Oh my, living his best life.
He got married. That's probably what it was.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Shout out to Miss Keisha. She said, listen, what we
she
not
gets
gonna do.
100% of the credit. So anyway, it was like once I got here, I was starting to sort of see the Atlanta hip hop, I guess the latest iteration of Atlanta hip hop, really kind of taking hold of the mainstream. I got to see that for myself. And then in the meantime, as I'm starting to write for places like Creative Loafing, I saw that there was places like MTV that wanted me to write for them, probably not even on the strength of my own writing, but it was just like, oh, so you could see this Waka Flocka in person? Okay, we're going to send you to do that. So it was really just kind of a matter of I don't know, supply and demand. Fortunately, I found all this stuff really interesting. I was like, I don't especially coming from Maryland, I didn't necessarily come from a place that had such a storied hip hop history. Now I'm entering a place where hip hop is in conversation with, the civil rights movement, and Atlanta is trying to figure out its cultural identity beyond that. And so it was just kind of a no-brainer, really, to kind of make that my focus while I'm living here.
But you're so good at it. No, seriously, I just really appreciate how you don't just, some folks profile the artist and it's all they stick to. You kind of read someone in the magazines or something. They're I met this person at this restaurant.
Sure.
They were running
oh my God,
late.
Always getting lunch. They got a niçoise salad or something.
Yeah, and I'm just I don't care about the salad. I want to know more about the person. And I feel like in your writing, you do that. So I guess my question would be, you and I think Gavin, again, Godfrey, and Rodney Carmichael for Creative Loading Road, straight out of Stankonia.
Yeah.
Which is, didn't it win an award? It was award winning.
It was voted for an Atlanta Press Club award. Yeah.
I'll take it. So it's you have this award winning discussion about, OutKast Atlanta. Can you talk to me a little bit about, how that kind of came together and how y'all divvied up who was going to write what?
Yeah, well, first of all, Rodney Carmichael, having written for Creative Loafing, he had already done, what was it, the oral history of Aquemini, something like that. He had basically talked to everybody in the dang Dungeon family or whatever. So that wasn't necessarily, so when we saw that a seminal anniversary is about to come up, aka the 20-year anniversary of Southern Playlistic. Yep. Not to mention the At Last tour was happening, even though we didn't know they were going to be in Atlanta yet.
So it wasn't just me. So I went
No one knew.
I went to Counterpoint.
Right.
I had an experience.
No one had any idea. We really thought Coachella or Counterpoint was going to be the closest that they were going to be able to come, that they weren't going to touch down. But we were begrudgingly, we were all right, we'll celebrate this, even though you decided not to come down here. They ended up coming. It ended up being fine. No big deal. But anyway, we were looking ahead at this anniversary, and like I said, Rodney, and not to mention Creative Loafing, have already talked to these people. But so that story has already been sort of explained, how they ascended to become define Atlanta hip hop as we know it today. But I remember we were at what was Octane over in the West Side off Howell Mill or whatever. And just kind of reflecting on how much Atlanta has changed. And then at the same time, there was also a New York Times story that had done something very similar, only with landmarks pertaining to Notorious B.I.G. and stuff like that. So we're that's it. Atlanta has really changed. OutKast Atlanta has really changed, whether that's because of OutKast or, a ripple effect that's happening. So Rodney really kind of took off from there and to sort of conceptualize what that would really look like. I remember we did have a conversation about which landmarks we're going to talk about. The landmarks that got name checked in lyrics, but then also were really crucial to their come up, whether that was strip clubs or, music venues, stuff like that. So we really just kind of took off from there. So I think it ended up being really interesting because Gavin got the chance to visit the original dungeon. And that poor lady, she has absolutely nothing to do with the Dungeon family whatsoever, but I swear she could open a museum in her basement because miraculously she did not finish this red clay dirt basement with exposed pipes in the ceiling where the Dungeon family, as kids, as teens, practice their signatures and stuff like that. So really, yeah, that was how that story came to be. Like, it was about recognizing OutKast, but then also like using that time as an interesting way to reflect on, well, what has OutKast effect, like impact has been. And we thought it just made perfect sense, because that's how like a lot of Southern hip hop goes. A lot of it at that time was very much tied to like cultivating like a regional identity. So
I guess the other part of that would be when we have these conversations, I guess, in the academy, we have conversations about hip hop, or at least they think they having conversations about hip hop. It's, usually New York or the West Coast. You might throw Chicago in there for good measure every once in a while.
Should, yeah.
But like when it comes to the South, there's very little like academic inquiry, right? So as somebody who focuses on Southern hip hop, like my go-to source are the journalists, are the interviews, like it was such a useful thing for me to have straight out of Stankonia. Because that was useful in the classes that I teach on OutKast and on Southern hip hop, but it's also really dope that y'all are also here. So it was like really, so thank you for that. So I mean, I guess that's what I would ask you is, what do you think the climate is for journalism about Southern hip hop? Do you feel like there's still that distinction that, I'm a journalist who happens to focus on Southern hip hop, or is like, I'm just a hip hop journalist?
I think, what's most interesting about covering Southern hip hop at large is just the fact that it is such a musical hub, but it isn't necessarily like a media hub. And I think that's where the disconnect sort of lies. Like, I think media at large like understands the cultural movement that has been happening for the past like 20, 30 years, but they're not able to kind of like see it firsthand. You know what I mean? I guess at the end of the day, I feel personally that I have to define myself as like a Southern hip hop journalist, because I see the value in being able to focus on that. Like, I think I'm in a really privileged position to where I can cover this like on the ground, honestly. And I really see, I think like for like the past couple years, we've been talking about like, does regionalism matter and everything, especially as mainstream hip hop comes to resemble what's coming out of Atlanta now. But especially as of late, I've been thinking back to like when I really got my start in journalism, which was like in different editions of like the Gazette newspapers in Maryland, right? I grew up in like Montgomery County, Maryland, which is closer to PG County, which is closer to DC. But then once we moved to Frederick County, that's when I started like interning at newspapers. And even just like on that basic level, we understood that Maryland, this tiny state, isn't a monolith.
You can say tiny ass state.
Okay.
It's okay.
I was like, not the children. It's okay. So I mean, I saw the value in that inherently. It was just like, I'm not gonna be able to cover Montgomery County from Frederick. That seems really stupid. There's a whole different culture just on the sole basis of the fact that they're further away from the nation's capital and closer to West Virginia. So I think that's what that really kind of comes down to. It's just like, I don't think I would be able to cover Atlanta hip hop the way that I do if I wasn't based down here, let alone have like a tacit understanding of Southern hip hop as a whole. You know what I mean? So yeah.
So I guess like a piggyback on that question would be, you had this really dope article in Washington Post talking about, Jeezy's My President is Black, which for the record, I still feel like if I never hear it again, it'll be too soon.
I meant to ask you about that.
No, because it was like, I was in Florida, I was in Tallahassee.
Okay.
And, it was made official that Obama had won the election. And that's all I heard in my neighborhood. That's all I heard on campus at Florida State. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I can't. It's not that it was a bad song. Like, Jeezy, it wasn't a bad song, shouty. It was just everybody was playing it out.
You just heard it for 72 hours straight.
Straight. Plus. So you have that really great article in the Washington Post. You've also written for Creative Loafing. You written for the Red Bull Music Academy. You've written for all of these, Rolling Stone, all of these. So I guess my question is like, do they expect you to present Southern hip hop in a particular way in these different venues?
I don't know if the expectation is necessarily there. I just think that, like, at that point, like, I'm so eager to get that perspective that I'm like, just give me the chance. I promise I'll do you good. Whatever. Like, even when I pitched that to that Jeezy article that you mentioned to the Washington Post, I was extremely nervous because even though that song kind of set the tone for what became defined as like Obama's hip hop administration, I was like, this almost feels too local. But on the other hand, I was really fortunate in that, to put it mildly, there was a contentious gubernatorial election coming up that
Very mildly.
Right. That was kind of defined, like, and I guess the most pervasive issue surrounding that election more or less was about voter representation. And when it came down to it, I was like, that's the exact story that I want to tell with Jeezy's My President is Black, is like, this is somebody who has never been able to see himself in like the political system.
Because he just recently started voting. Like, it wasn't like
He voted for Obama. That was his first time ever voting, ever, right? So I think, I don't know if my editors expect something of me, but I would like to think that through my work, they understand that I have a certain passion for like kind of just getting that particular beat correct.
But it's also showing the complexity of what Southern hip hop is and what it's not. So it's like, on the one hand, you kind of have this mainstream idea that Southern hip hop is party music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but we like to shake our ass. It's party music.
Right, yeah.
But the other part of that is also a means for folks to kind of get a reading, a feel of what's going on in the world around them. And I think that we don't give Southern hip hop enough credit to be complicated enough to do both at the same time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, what role do you think that journalism plays in showing the complexity of what Southern hip hop can do?
I mean, I think there's a tremendous amount of work. I mean, really, the work is all the more crucial, especially in a time where I think the media landscape more than ever is defined by like the East Coast and the West Coast. I mean, if anything, we can draw all these parallels between the, I guess, hip hop's trajectory and then like media's trajectory. Like, once people saw that Atlanta had something to say or whatever, like, people started to really take notice and like, oh wow, there's this whole other part of the world. I think journalism plays that same role. So I think it's really crucial for us to kind of, cover it as thorough as we should, just because I think it helps us better recognize who they are as like a people, I think, first and foremost. And I like to think that the biggest role in my job is to provide context as well, because like you said, like, Southern hip hop has this perception of being like party music, and it's like, none of y'all were at 559 when this stuff was coming up, and at the same time, y'all don't understand like where 559 is located in one of the more blighted neighborhoods of Atlanta, where they might just want to like fucking relax, like, give them a break for one night, let them crunk, let them snap, like, let them just do all this shit, let them have this, you know what I mean? So I think, yeah, that's the role, is to provide context, because it's all the more necessary, especially since Atlanta in particular is such an epicenter, and Southern hip hop at large is such a creative hub.
So I think, one of my qualms, not necessarily what I'm just thinking out loud, is that because the image and idea of Atlanta is so big, those of us who do Southern hip hop outside of Atlanta from Georgia are like, well, shit. Like, so, I'm from Albany, as you already.
Yes.
Everybody knows that Dr. Bradley is from Albany.
You need like a cape.
I do. I need like my James Brown cape that just says Benny Girl on the back.
Yes.
But I mean, like, so being from the Benny, Field Mob was big. They were talking about, these places. I'm like, oh, I know exactly where that's at. I know. And then they transitioned to Atlanta. And I'm just like, where do you think rural Southern artists fit into this conversation about Southern hip hop? Because now it's to the point where we hear Southern hip hop, folks are more comfortable staying in these hubs, New Orleans, Houston, Atlanta, Miami, you know what I'm saying? Memphis. But what about, the rural Southern hip hop people who don't necessarily migrate to these Southern hubs. Do you have any thoughts about, what journalism should or could do for them?
Oh my God. I mean, I think journalism at large, and we're not even just talking about music in particular, right? Like, I think journalism can certainly do a lot more work to kind of like boost representation outside of these metropolitan areas. That's actually something that I think about like all the time. And I'm sure that's why, like 10 years ago, like, Jeezy felt that he had to move all the way from Hawkinsville to make into Atlanta and so on and so forth, because he felt like he wasn't gonna get any shine like whatsoever. I think I would really hope, I mean, you could take this as like a downside or upside or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that more of us like, are working freelance at this point. There's less staff jobs than there were ever before. But I would hope that in the near future, maybe journalists would feel more comfortable, like maybe staying outside of these media hubs, because I think what's starting to happen is that there's cultural blind spots now. There's like coverage blind spots, to where like, it would be all the better for understanding America, let alone Field Mob, So I think I would hope that we get to a point where we are able to kind of like see these stories unfold in their actual environment. That would be my hope.
No, I love that. Final question. What do you got going on? How can the folks get in touch with you? All that good stuff.
Oh man, so I'm on Twitter at Mina Ann Lee, and I'm not really doing much other than I do have a podcast like right now with my folks, Ja and Yo Phillips. It's called Something to Say. We already had you on there, and that was amazing.
Yeah, we acted up pretty bad. It's okay.
It's essential listening, kids. It's essential listening.
No, it's really great. Shout out to Yo and Ja, man. I had a great time.
Yay.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for giving us a little bit of time. This was great.
Thank you.
Orange nails popping.
And
I'm Dr. Regina Bradley. This is OutKasted Conversations. We'll see y'all next time. Y'all be easy.